This is Talk Sports Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham, and I'm delighted to say that back for his second appearance of the week is Mr. Mike Porky Parry. A very good morning to you, Mr. Parry.
A very good morning to you, Mike. Delighted to be in the studio with you here. So many great issues to get stuck into. You've had a dynamic and powerful start to the show, Mike, so let's move it on.
Let's move it on, because AVB is still very much the story of the week. I don't know if you've enjoyed looking at the pictures on the back of the papers this morning of him looking like a Smurf, really, is about the only thing you could describe him as. Dressed in sort of a blue bobble hat, a blue sort of tracksuit top. Unbelievably, we had a Liverpool fan on just before you came in there saying that he thought it was important that a manager wears a suit on the touchline, and that makes him a good manager. Well, and he normally is very well dressed, but he stopped wearing that little coat, hasn't he, that he used to wear, that little sort of car coat thing.
He stopped doing a lot of things. In fairness to him, he's playing in a town 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle, so you can forgive him for looking Smurf-like tonight. But I think he looks Smurf-like all the time, not just his dress and all that, but he acts like a Smurf. Martin Samuel, who's a great writer in the Daily Mail, pointed out, Martin writes things sometimes which we're all thinking but can't say, but he pointed out that when AVB first came to this country, Andrew Villas-Boas, he went to Chelsea obviously, and his initial trick was to crouch down on the touchline all the time. Now, I remember talking to Martin Lipton of the Daily Mirror about it, and Martin said, we just don't know why he does it. You know, we sit very close to him sometimes in the press box and all that. Nobody can figure it out. So they started writing about how ridiculous he looked. The crowd started booing him, so he stopped doing it. Now, as Martin pointed out, if he was really committed to the idea that the best way to watch a football match is worm view level, that's why he crouches down, why is he giving it up? And he says he's full of affectation.
And also, why wasn't he just lying flat? Because I remember reading that piece as well. And he said, and why is it that no other manager in the history of football, no matter how good they were, Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley, Sir Alex Ferguson, why are none of them crouching down their haunches?
Believe it or not, in their days, you actually did get football at that level sometimes, because the dugout was actually a dugout. And
now, why did they change that, I wonder?
Well, I think because in the end of the day, they had to make pitches cambered, so for the drainage situation, and if a pitch is cambered, you can't actually see the other half of it if you're watching it at eye level. But anyway, that's by the by. The point is, to me, AVB is, to me, he's always been, full of confidence and arrogance and throwing it back at the journalist when he's winning. And when he's losing, he mumbles and looks at the ground and doesn't want to say anything and then throws it back at the journalist in a nasty sort of way. You know what I mean?
Well, I thought when he started off at the beginning of this season, because he was clearly, he clearly had a bit of a body blow, having lost Gareth Bale, because Gareth Bale named his child, I think, after AVB, didn't he? He gave him the same initials and all that, right? Now, having lost Gareth Bale, he was then quite chuffed with himself, because obviously Tottenham decided to spend all this money.
Exactly.
And I thought the man that was the kind of slightly sullen, slightly kind of bitter guy from the Chelsea days had changed, but he seems to be going back into that now.
He turned the Gareth Bale thing into a victory for himself, don't worry, and dismissed Gareth Bale as an irrelevance. One man doesn't make a team. Actually, one man does make a team.
In Tottenham's case.
Yeah, because Gareth Bale was the man who always got you out of trouble when you had a problem. They can't get out of trouble now. I mean, look, I still think that United on Sunday is a big one for him. On the Chelsea thing, why on earth would Mr. Levy, the chairman of Spurs, think it was such a brilliant idea, what a brilliant idea that nobody else has had, to appoint a manager to your club who has already been found out to be not good enough for one of your main rivals, and who was paid £11.7 million to walk away from Chelsea because he was so hopeless. I remember the classic picture of Comrade Abramovich, or Mr. Abramovich, walking across the grass at Cobham, that magnificent training ground near me in Stockbroker-Belt, Surrey, good part of the world. Well, not far.
It's quite a long way away from you, actually.
And he's walking across, and AVB's following him with a clipboard, looking like, honestly, a bag carrier. And to me, his confidence, his self-esteem had been shot to pieces, and that was because he tried to take on the senior players at Chelsea, not a kind
John Terry and Ashley Cole, amongst others.
And Frank Lampard. But it wasn't a kind of it's you or me type situation from the players. All the players wanted was a bit of respect, and he came in and said, I'm going to clear you lot out because you're not good enough. But
he fell victim, didn't he, to something that lots of people fall victim to over the years, and some of us have in newspaper terms, when you get put into a job and they say, well, just start getting rid of some of these people here. And in the end, there's such a kind of groundswell of opinion against you that the people who've told you to do all that suddenly don't back you anymore. I think that's what happened with Abramovich.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. Get rid of the old guard and let's play a new way. And then as soon as the old guard started knocking on Mr. Abramovich's door, or more likely appearing on his yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean, you're absolutely right. It wasn't a good idea anymore, and he started having to change it. Anyway, that's by the by. Point is, look, I'm looking at some headlines which our listeners now will read tomorrow morning. By the time they're listening to this as a podcast, they'll have read this. But in the Telegraph, for instance, even though Spurs have won in Tromsø tonight, 2-0. Spurs failed to impress ahead of United Test.
Well, they couldn't even score a goal in the first half up there.
Absolutely. I think the United game on Sunday, isn't it?
Sunday, yes. TalkSport live commentary game as well.
It's the early one, is it?
It is indeed.
The early one, that's right, yeah. That's going to be so interesting. But what I don't get, you see, about Spurs, and Mr. Levy wants to instantly change Spurs from a fairly parochial English club into a European giant overnight, and the way he wants to do it is by appointing managers who have exotic names, like, for instance, Jacques Santini.
Yes.
Jacques Santini couldn't even speak English, and lasted
How long was he there?
less than one season.
Right.
Christian Gross,
yes,
who became
he was a Swiss
joke.
one, wasn't he?
He was a joke. He was going up and down on the tube and all that kind of stuff.
He's become quite successful since then, though, isn't he? Managing some club in Switzerland? I can't remember now.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't follow his career. Yuande Ramos, okay? Yuande Ramos.
Yuande.
So Jacques Santini, Yuande Ramos, Andre Villalobos, all very exotic sounding names, except the man who's brought Spurs more glory than anybody else since the glory years of the early 60s, Harry Redknapp. Harry Redknapp, an Englishman with an English name. But that's not exotic enough for Mr. Levy. Mr. Levy wants Spurs. He's got all shows all these plans all the time. Well, this is massive, great new stadium in one of the most deprived areas of Britain.
Yeah.
Why would you build a stadium like that in somewhere like Edmonton?
Well, because it's near where the old stadium is.
Well, it is, and for that
there's lots of good reasons for that.
You should applaud them. But the point is, Harry, who likes walking his bulldog around sandbanks near where some of my family live.
The dog with a bank account that we talked about before.
Yeah, exactly. Harry is not exotic enough for Mr. Levy, by the look of it.
Well, let's listen to what somebody else who's not that exotic in terms of his names. Lord Sugar was on the Alan Brazil Sports Breakfast this morning, and he was talking about what he thinks about AVB and what he thinks should next happen at Spurs. Because he's a man that was, of course, chairman of Spurs.
This is great,
and he knows precisely what he's talking about.
Look, what is the Tottenham way? The Tottenham way is we want them to win games. We want flair. We want to see, we want to see a lot of goals go in, and we want an exciting game. We want lots of goals and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we want to win. And there was criticism in the past about the way that Arsenal used to play. It was boring, and they used to keep winning 1-0 and all that type of stuff. But they won the league. They're the ones in the Champions League every year, and we're away. But the formation that AVB plays, I don't understand at all. And I'll put my hands up. I'm no strategist. I'm no great football expert. I don't understand it at all.
It's funny because on the show I've been saying, I wanted to give AB a chance. I promise you, but I'm trying to understand them, and I'm trying to understand where this so-called magic is, and where it's going to come out, and where he's going to prove to everyone that he is the new Mourinho. He's going to win things. I'm still waiting, to be honest. I'm still waiting.
I exactly agree 100% with you. You've got to give the guy the benefit of the doubt, and you're sitting there thinking, right, okay, well, I'm waiting. Well, go on then. I'm waiting for you. I know that you're a different type of person. You're a different type of tactic. We're sitting there patiently waiting to see what goes on. But, when you change the team around like he did the other day with so many different players in it, and you've got a whole host of players there, I don't know much about management in football, but you bring in 6, 7, 8 new players, right, that have just come from abroad, and you've got to give them time to settle in, obviously. They've got to understand the culture and all that stuff. You can't just chuck them in, and I don't get it myself. I just don't get it. I tell you what my dream would be is that my good friend Sir Alex Ferguson will get itchy feet in about a year or so's time and decide he wants to get back into management again and maybe bring his wonderful wife down to London and manage our team. That would be my dream.
You sort of want to hear Lord Sugar go, "You're fired" at the end of that, really, don't you?
No, I wouldn't.
You don't want to hear that?
Oh, well, I've never watched The Apprentice.
Well, that's what he's famous for saying.
Yeah, I don't care.
But that's when you hear that voice, the only words you want to hear is, it's a bit like one of those final kind of conversations he has with one of the hapless, ne'er-do-wells.
I don't know, I've never seen it.
Well, let me explain it to you then.
Why?
Well, so that you can understand
what
the zeitgeist is about, knowing what goes on around you and what things people other than you watch. Nobody else just sits around watching Coronation Street in a bath. Some people actually have other tastes. Just shut up for a second. Basically, at the end of his diatribe, he will say to somebody, you know, I'm still waiting to see what your plans are, Mr. Villas-Boas. I'm still waiting to see precisely what your tactics are leading to. You seem to have bought an awful lot of players. None of them seem to know what to play. You're fired. And that would be the best conversation I think a lot of Tottenham fans could hear.
Well, he had that conversation with Terry Venables.
He certainly did.
When he was the owner and Terry Venables was the chief executive, so to speak. You know what I mean? And you're right. But see, listening to Lord Sugar there, what you listen to is absolute practicality.
Yeah.
You're not listening to a man who has some airy-fairy dream in his head about being one of Europe's great clubs.
This is the guy who invented Amstrad, after all. You know, he's not exactly a visionary, is he?
Yeah. Last week I read that Lord Sugar, who actually has made a bigger fortune in property than he has in electronics, and I'm sure he'd accept all that because he very wisely invested the profits.
Well, somebody once said when there were only 2 computers in the world, Amstrad's was the worst.
I think that's absolutely right, actually. That's a bit harsh, allegedly.
Yes.
But I read last week that Lord Sugar has just bought a new block of flats in London to add to his property profile. I think it's run by one of his sons. And the price was £25.2 million, and it added, just as an addendum at the bottom, the property was paid for in cash. So if you're walking around with 25 million quid in your pocket, you actually know what you're doing.
Yes, that's
business-wise.
true. Yeah.
It proves that you've got and by the way, as far as I can make out, Lord Sugar is the only entrepreneur I know who went into football and came out with a profit, and a healthy profit, looking after Spurs, still owns a percentage, and it's a smallish one of Spurs. When I go there, I still see him in the boardroom, and, you know, when you read of former owners of Crystal Palace losing the whole of their £40 million fortune on a dream, Lord Sugar didn't. So
and he's still a fan of the club as well, isn't he? That's
yes, he's a fan. Yeah, he's a fan of the club. I mean, it's he bought it on recommendation and became very attached to it. Looking at Robbie Savage's column tomorrow in the Mirror, AVB has turned Harry's great entertainers into the greatest of bores. Now, this backs up a little bit, Mike, what I'm saying. What Robbie there is saying, and Robbie's a very entertaining character. A great friend of mine, by the way.
Is he?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure that some of the Twitter conversations you've had with him would bear that out.
Oh, I think you'll find that, you know, that was all a little bit of...
it's a misunderstanding.
Mischievous humour, you know.
Okay.
But AVB has turned Harry's great entertainers. So, you know, Robbie's making the point you and I've just made. Harry was the best thing for Tottenham since the early 60s. He made them entertaining. He had Gareth Bale in a position where Gareth Bale wanted to play for the club. And now AVB's turned the great support. He's only scored 9 goals all season.
I know.
And 6 of those from open play, isn't it?
Well, if you look at all of the teams around them, I mean, everybody else has scored almost twice as many goals as them, sometimes 3 times as many goals as them, and it just doesn't make any sense at all for him to not to completely change the way he's played. I mean, I had to laugh when I heard somebody saying, you know, he's been complaining about the width of the pitch. He doesn't even use the width of the pitch as it is at the moment.
No, that's...
Does he want it? Maybe he wants it narrower.
It's absolutely... If I was a Spurs fan, I'd be so blinking frustrated, I really would. You know, frustrated in the fact that, why don't they look at the club simply? Why don't they say, look, why don't we live within our means? Why don't we live within our practical ambitions? Instead of going around and trying to make out... This is what annoys me about Mr. Levy. You know, he's said to be a great negotiator, and he takes transfer deals right to the limit. You know, the Berbatov one last minute, the Gareth Bale one last minute. It frustrates the players. But if all that is actually upsetting the rhythm of the club, is it worth it? Is it worth it? If I was a Spurs fan, I'd say, please, 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 can you just deal with today and not start thinking about where we're going to be in 15 years' time?
Very, very sensible words from the Porkmeister. Porky Parry is here. I'm Mike Graham. We'll have more next on TalkSport. This is TalkSport Extra Time. It's the 2 Mikes, Mr. Mike Parry and Mike Graham. Some might call us the professionals. Other people might call us the rank amateurs, of course, but that's a different story.
No.
This is obviously a piece of music you would recognise from your formative years.
Well, I'll tell you, I enjoy it more now than I did then, because when you were watching it then, you know, you had the Sweeney and you had that, and you took it as writ that sort of gritty drama was around.
Yeah.
It's not anymore. So, you know, we all have an odd hour when you think, what's on the telly, and you flick through it, Burton. If this is on, or the Sweeney, I love it. And one of the reasons I love it, Mike, is because it reminds me of growing up in that era, and it was a simpler way of life. I know that
it really
sounds
was.
silly, but for instance, there were no mobile phones, so you could say, well, hang on, life's simpler now, you've got mobile phones. Actually, it was simpler in those days. Life was never so complicated.
Well, actually, people now ask me, I mean, my kids particularly, they go, how did you actually arrange to meet anybody when you didn't have a mobile phone? And actually, I'm struggling to remember how we did it in those days.
I'm struggling to remember how I worked as a reporter for about 10 years as a young kid, driving around in a Ford Cortina, the whole of the north of England. I worked for the Daily Express without a mobile phone.
Thinking that you were either Bodie or Doyle. We're talking, of course, about Lewis Collins, who sadly died at the age of 67 yesterday from cancer, living in California as he does now. But everybody, I suppose, at a certain age of their life as a youth wanted to be either Bodie or Doyle. Which one did you want to be?
I actually wanted to be Doyle, not Bodie. I thought Bodie was a bit too hard for me, a bit too aggressive, a bit too edgy, you know what I mean? And a bit too unpredictable, I suppose. But, you know, he had it all. He was extremely good looking. He was a very hard man, always pulled the girls, and drove round. Now, I said a Capri in a tweet earlier today, but actually that was Martin Shaw.
Yeah.
That was Doyle. In fact, Bodie's most famous car was an RS 2000 Escort.
Yes.
Sorry, was it an Escort?
Yeah, it was an Escort,
which in fact was a top car.
That was the very sort of souped-up version of the Escort, wasn't it? Well, and in the same way that in the Sweeney they had that big Ford Granada that you became...
It was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they used to be in Rovers and they used to be in Jaguars and all that kind of thing. And it was a remarkable situation. And you know, everyone had the leather jackets and the polo neck. Did you wear polo necks and leather jackets then as well?
I didn't. I was more for those shirts which had rounded collars, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? And sometimes flowery...
Ben Sherman shirts.
Yeah, Ben Sherman, that's right, and all that kind of stuff. But what I really loved about it was that it portrayed life in such a matter-of-fact sort of situation, rather than these days where, take Coronation Street, for instance, now. Within Coronation Street at the moment, there are 3 same-sex relationships, which is fine, no problem, but 3 in one street seems, you know, quite excessive.
Higher than average.
Somebody make it, well, in a little street like Coronation Street, there's a situation in which a woman is dying of cancer, sadly, and there's a big row between her and her husband about whether she can take her own life, euthanasia, you know, that's the euthanasia one.
Right.
There's very recently been one about a woman carrying a surrogate baby for another couple. I mean, you know, they introduce every possible form of...
and then at the end of all of these shows, they have this, you know, if you need help with any of these issues, you know, please ring this hotline. You know, like you're going to ring a hotline because you've seen something on Coronation Street or Emmerdale or something like that. But the great thing about these shows as well was they were constantly drinking and smoking. I mean, you know, Regan in the Sweeney had the bottle of whiskey in a drawer, and his assistant, you know, Dennis Waterman, was always just puffing on a fag, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, what was it? Hey, Gav, you got a snatch, or what do they call it?
A snout.
A snout, yeah. There were 2 meanings of the word snout. One was your informant, wasn't it? And one was a cigarette.
That's right.
And you never knew which one they were talking about.
The informant was the one they were always beating up, of course.
The guy that was beaten up. And whenever Reagan went into a bar, he always had an eye on the barmaid, didn't he? He was always, you know, either there or had been there or wanted to get there.
Yeah, or he was always shacked up with some woman that was losing patience with him or something like that. But I mean, the interesting thing about Lewis Collins, just to talk about him for a moment, is I'm sure you've read this today, which I didn't know, was that he actually auditioned for the part of James Bond.
Yeah, I knew that.
And he didn't get it because they gave it to Roger Moore instead. Imagine how different James Bond would have been if it'd been him instead of Roger Moore. Because I must say, I didn't like Roger Moore as James Bond.
Oh, I loved Roger Moore's James Bond. I thought, with the twinkle in his eye, he perfectly took the mickey out of himself in a way
did.
Lewis Collins couldn't. One of the arguments about Lewis Collins, because I remember being a big fan of his at the time, used to read it, he was very intense on the set apparently when they were doing it, all this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Which means he's very professional, obviously, as an actor, but... There was a real macho feel, apparently, about the way this show was made. And I don't know whether Martin Shaw felt it went a bit over the top or something like that, but I definitely read allegations that whenever there was a star female actress, you know, and there was one in every episode, it was always, right, over the pub afterwards and a few drinks and bring her with you, so to speak. You know what I mean? No, that sort of thing. But look, I'm not knocking it because it was a different age.
It was a different age. And again, back in the 70s, that was a different time. And I was talking to Gareth A. Davis there about John Conte, who... I can't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but my sister and I happened to be in some nightclub when she was only about 16 or 17, and she was chatted up by him, she was chatted up by John H. Stacey, she was chatted up by all kinds of boxers over time, because women were very much treated differently.
I'll tell you a great story about John Conte very briefly, right? He lost it at the end of his career, and he lost all his money and everything, and he'd been on the rampage at one particular point, and I was doing a day shift for the Sunday Mirror on a Saturday, and I was told to go up and knock on his door in Bushey in Hertfordshire and put it to him. and he was raging at the time.
Right.
And
did he not drive his Rolls Royce down a street and straight down outside of every single car?
I don't know. But the point is, he'd very recently been the light heavyweight champion of the world, and I've been asked to go knock on his door while he was in a state of raging and see what happened.
Yeah.
So I did knock on the door, but not too loud, and the door didn't answer. And I rang back to the office. The news editor was a very famous guy called JP somebody or PJ somebody at the Sunday Mirror. Yeah. Legend of Fleet Street. And when I said, I think he's in there, but he's not coming to the door, he said, right. He said, are you looking at the house? I said, yes. He said, has it got a chimney? I said, yes. Is there any smoke coming out of the chimney? I said, yes. He said, go next door, borrow a ladder, and put a bag of cement on the chimney, and we'll smoke you out.
My Lord Leveson may wish to take some comments out of various people.
But anyway, getting back to Lewis Collins, one of the things about him we all love was the cars and racing round. Now, at the time that he had an RS2000 and Shaw had the Capri, I had a Vauxhall Viva.
Yeah.
G-Reg, 1969.
Was this the one with the black roof?
No, that was a more modern Vauxhall Viva I had about 3 or 4 years later when I worked in Birmingham.
This was the original tin can Vauxhall Viva.
Well, it was a turquoise one. There were thousands of them around, turquoise Vauxhall Vivas,
Horrendous.
Quite a nice shape and all that. In fact, I sold it to a bloke, actually, who's more of an idiot than me.
I've heard this story before.
And I sold it to him after my mate had lined the pistons with silver foil. To make them work, and as I was going back to work in the little Chester Chronicle office car to get back to the office, I passed him broken down on the dual carriageway 300 yards from my home. Just after I'd taken £275 off him for the car. But anyway, point is, there was a bloke in a pub in Chester, he was about my age, he used to drive in and out of the car park in a blue Capri. And I always, to this day, wondered, how on earth did he do it? How did he get the money? Because they were the dream cars of that age.
They absolutely were. And if you had enough money, you could move up to a Jensen. But the funniest thing about the whole CI5 organisation, or a Triumph Stag, the funniest thing about the whole CI5 organisation, which is what the professionals were technically called, fictional organisation headed by Gordon Jackson, by the way, in the days of the Iranian hostage siege, you might remember the Iranian embassy siege in London.
I did it.
In 1980. There was a sign being held up, apparently, by the Iranians outside who were demonstrating, down with CI5, because they thought they were the people that were actually attacking it.
Well, do you know what, Mike? What's interesting is nobody in the world had ever heard of the SAS until that siege happened. And then when those guys came skedoodling down from the roof on ropes and went crashing through the windows, everybody said,
abseiling,
crikey. Yeah, exactly. Except one of them got trapped on his rope and was dangling by his leg. But they went crashing through and stun grenades and all that. And that was the birth of the SAS. I mean, obviously they'd been around since the end of the Second World War, but nobody had ever heard of them until then. And after that, every government in the world who had a hostage situation would ring up the British government and say, can we borrow the SAS? And on one occasion...
Gordon Jackson used to answer.
Yeah, Gordon Jackson would answer, CI5 here, laddie. And on one occasion, I can't remember... Yes, I know what it was. In some country...
It's a long story, because we've got to have a break now.
No, in some country in South America, the SAS arrived, and before they even got there, the hostages surrendered. And because, they were based on all the fictitious CI5 stuff.
It'd be great if they turned up in full capris, wouldn't it? Yeah. This is Mike Porky Parry and Mike Graham. More from us coming up next.
Crazy, but that's how it goes.
This is Talk Sports Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. We are the two Mikes. Mike Parry is with me. The podcast will be available on iTunes a little bit later on in the day. We've been talking about a great many things, Mike. And actually, cars, particularly, which we're going to continue talking about in a moment, is the subject of a phone call that we've got here from Robin, who's a Spurs fan on the M69, it says here. Where is the M69, Robin?
It's in the Midlands.
That's up by Leicester, but I'm not on the M69. I'm on the M5 at the moment.
Well, why does it say you're on the M69?
Because you might have been.
I'm not too sure. No, I haven't been today.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right. Because we've got this tracker, you see. If you ring in from a particular part of the country, it says where you are. So it must be not working. We'll have to get the engineering department onto that, shall we?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the M5 heading towards Bristol.
M5, right, okay. What did you want to tell us about the professionals? Was it a show you enjoyed?
Oh, yes, very much, very much. And what I wanted to tell Porky is he got the cards the wrong way round.
Right, go on
then. That comes as no surprise, Robin.
No, Doyle was the RS Escort and Bodie was definitely the Capri.
Well, that's not what they said in the tributes today, honestly. And they had pictures of Bodie, famously, he's the one who slid across the bonnet of the Capri, but apparently it was to get to the RS 2000 Escort.
Really? So are you sure about this, Robin?
Yeah, absolutely. Doyle was the escort.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, I take your word for it over Porky's. He gets most things wrong. Robin, thanks very much indeed for your call. Well, you know, it's important to get these things right. I mean, I can't. It's in the midst of time. I don't actually watch it now because obviously it hasn't. I don't know when the last time it actually aired, but I haven't seen it for many, many years.
Oh, I think it's on. I think it's on twice a day on something like ITV4.
Oh, yeah, it's on one of those channels that plays the old
Saints.
stuff.
I still watch The Saints.
The Saints, well, the old Saints.
Oh, yeah, the old Saint with Roger Moore. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant.
See, I thought he was much better in that than he was as James Bond.
Maybe.
In fact, I'll tell you a story about Gordon, because Gordon Jackson used to live in Hampstead, where I grew up.
Right.
And my mother once crashed into his Jaguar.
Really? Just friendly neighbourhood things.
Yeah.
Sort of
well, no, and you know what Hampstead's like. The roads are quite narrow.
And
my mother, God bless her, was never one of the great drivers of all time. In fact, she's now been banned from driving, although she's nearly 90, because she managed, in an unbelievable accident that nobody can actually understand. She lives in America now. She was reversing out of her parking spot at a supermarket in Connecticut, and she somehow managed to rev the car in such a way that it spun around 360 degrees, knocked over a flagpole, and ended up in the shop.
Wow.
And nobody can work out how it happened.
Didn't get through the window or anything, did it?
Almost. She went through like a big display of flowers or something like that.
Wow.
I mean, thankfully she didn't get sued by, you know what they like in America.
Mind you, I've met your mother, and I have to say, the first time I met your mother, she was probably in about her 60s then or something, and she had orange hair. She looked like Vivienne Westwood.
She did.
So she's an eccentric character.
She is a bit eccentric, but she did once crash into Gordon Jackson's Jag. Apparently he was very charming about it and didn't take any worries about it. He said,
didn't call out CI5 to sort her out.
No, exactly right. But you've got a little story there about women drivers, haven't you?
Well, there's just a report out today which says that women drivers, you know, for all the fact that they're supposed to lack aggression and all that, are still not up to it when it comes to passing driving tests, and that they take twice as long to pass the driving test as men.
Well, maybe that means they're actually better drivers when they finally do then.
Men not only learn to drive faster, they're also more likely to pass their test first time, research has found. This is a report that's out today. I passed my driving test second time.
Yes.
The first time I failed it because the idiot instructor who taught me how to back a car round a curb had got it all wrong, and I hit the curb.
But of course, I mean, that's one of the, I don't even know if they do that now, where you had to back the car around the curb, because apparently, I mean, if you now were to back a car around a curb into another road, presumably that's an offence, isn't it?
Well, not only that, there's almost certainly going to be a car there in the way anyway, so you can't do it.
It's a pretty stupid manoeuvre.
I agree,
Similarly
stupid.
to that, the emergency stop. I failed my I'd been driving in America for years and years and years without having to take a test, right? And when I finally came back to work for the Express, I had to take a test in order to get why are you looking at me with such a quizzical look?
Sorry, how come you were driving cars around in America without a...
Because I had a provisional licence, and that was good enough for them, as far as they were concerned.
Well, they let you loose on the roads in America with highways and freeways and turnpikes, and you had a provisional licence.
Well, then latterly I got a sort of an American licence. When
Where
I first went there,
did you learn to drive?
I actually learned to drive in America, because when I went there, when I was 23, I'd never learned to drive in London, because I didn't need to. I got around everywhere by bus or by taxi or by train, you know, so I didn't need to drive. So actually my girlfriend then, who later became my wife, taught me how to drive in the Shea Stadium car park.
Shea Stadium car park, where the Beatles
played, where the New York Mets used to play.
Played their last concert.
They did. Or one of their last concerts, anyway.
I think it was the last one, yeah.
But no, absolutely, I failed it for pulling out in front of traffic, and the test was going on somewhere in North London, and I said to the guy, well, if I hadn't pulled out, I'd been sitting there all day.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely unbelievable.
Except that you're not supposed to wrap yourself around somebody else's bumper. Anyway, we digress.
Yes. Let's talk about Everton, because another big weekend for Everton coming up. They're going up to Stoke, and the biggest question I've got for you...
Stoke coming to Goodison.
Oh, Stoke coming to Goodison,
it's a Goodison.
Oh, okay, I thought it was away. Anyway, the biggest question, though, for all Everton fans is Leighton Baines, and I heard you on the Sports Breakfast with David Ginola, and as many times as you call him a sophisticate, he clearly doesn't know what you're talking about.
My friend
he clearly
David
doesn't understand half of what you're saying.
He says he said, Michael, I love the word sophisticated. And I said, no, you're a sophisticat. It's sophisticated.
He doesn't understand what you're saying.
Is the adjective.
He doesn't, I mean, he has enough trouble with Mr. Brazil, but I mean, poor guy. Anyway, listen, what about Leighton Baines? That's what you're talking about. Mr. Brazil was saying Leighton Baines has played his last game for Everton. Is that true?
No, this is a load of, absolute gibberish, which people are talking to me about to try and wind me up. The thinking is that with Leighton out between 4 weeks and 6 weeks, by the time he gets back, the window will be open, and he'll be stolen by David Moyes and taken to Manchester United. As I said to Al, an inverted pyramid of piffle.
So you don't think it's going to happen?
Of course it's not going to happen. Don't be ridiculous.
You're going to look pretty stupid if it does, though, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
Are you saying that Leighton Baines doesn't want to play in the Champions League?
Look, Leighton Baines may want to play in the Champions League, he may want to play for a top club, but the jury's out on whether or not Manchester United are going to be a top club this season, right? So I think...
Well, after Wednesday's result, I don't think the jury's out. I think the jury's coming back, and the jury's going, this is going to be a pretty good team.
Well, look, they had a good result in Europe, and surprisingly, considering David Moyes has had no experience of the Champions League, he's done remarkably well in that competition, but he's not doing so well in the Premier League. And would you say Manchester United are going to win the Premier League title?
Well, they could. I would say they could do.
No, I didn't say could they. I'm saying are they going to?
Well, I haven't got a crystal ball in front of me.
Get off the blinking fence. Get the splinters out your backside.
I would say
give me an answer to that
I would
question.
say there are 3 teams that could win the Premier League.
3 teams could win the Premier League.
I will give you the 3 teams now if you wish.
There's actually about 7 or 8 teams who could win the Premier League.
But I'm going to give you the 3 that I think could win it.
Give me the one. Just give me the one.
Well, I think Arsenal are going to win it, actually.
You think Arsenal are going to win it?
Yeah.
That's a very bold prediction.
Yes.
I think Chelsea are going to win it.
Chelsea have got no chance.
Chelsea have
I'd like
no
to see
chance.
Jose Mourinho winning it because I like to see Chelsea and Jose Mourinho doing well, but I just don't think they're going to score enough goals.
Let's get back to Everton, right?
Yeah, so
one
Everton...
of the reasons I'm delighted we're playing Stoke this weekend. Sorry to interrupt you there, but I felt it necessary.
Yeah, I'm used to it.
I am infuriated by a ruling by the Stoke Council, or one particular councillor, who is banning children from feeding ducks in ponds and lakes in Stoke. Well, of course I'm infuriated because the blinking ducks will starve.
I didn't know they had any lakes in Stoke.
They're not lakes, they're ponds, they're park ponds.
Yeah, it's not like the Lake District, is it?
No, it's not like the Lake District.
It's the Potteries, they call it. On a clear day you can see across the street.
How many towns make up the Potteries?
Hey?
How many towns make up the Potteries?
No idea, I can't see that far.
5, you fool.
Well, I mean, I've been to Stoke a few times. TalkSport's got a big affiliation, of course, with Signal FM up there.
Of course.
And the weather is not often very good, and you can't often see across the street.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Honestly, you must have been gone there in 1953.
So what 5 towns are they then?
Well, the Stoke, Burslem, Port Vale, and 2 others. Now,
so you don't know the 5 towns?
Well,
so once again, you're asking me to tell you something that you don't even know the answer to.
I'm not an expert on the potteries.
You're not an expert on anything.
I read the books by the author who based them on the potteries.
Really?
Very famous author.
The famous 5?
No. It was a trilogy of books.
Trilogy?
Yeah.
That's only 3.
I know. But there's a trilogy of books about the 5 towns. Anyway, look.
Apparently the potteries, I'm told now by our research department, is actually 6 towns.
Well, it used to be 5. Perhaps they've got another one.
So they've added an extra one.
Perhaps it's a new town.
Yeah. So you only know half of them.
Look, can I get on with it, please?
Yeah, go on then. Tell us about the Lake District of Stoke and the 6 towns. No, it's not the Lake District.
Look, the point is, this councillor, this numbnut councillor has said you don't feed the ducks because it causes devastation to the parks, which is utter rubbish. And all these people keep tweeting me and saying, don't feed bread to the ducks, it's not good for them. Utter nonsense. When bread goes into water and dissipates and the ducks eat it, it's good for them.
Look, how many times have I told you that giving bread to ducks is actually a very bad idea indeed?
It's not a bad idea.
Because they can't, because bread, particularly that plastic bread that you buy, because you don't go to a kind of a boulangerie to buy the bread, do you? I bet you buy that plastic bread, right?
No, I don't. I go to bakeries and buy the bread.
Really?
Yeah.
Because if you're not careful about the kind of dough, what it does is it just kind of compresses inside their stomachs, and it's like swallowing heavy bits of paper.
I've been doing this for 10 years, and not one single duck has ever died or become ill through me feeding it bread.
So the ducks that you feed are all more than 10 years old, are they?
No, but I'm saying...
they die.
I don't go there to the ponds, do I? There's a number of ponds that I look after with ducks on them. I never see ducks floating face up or face down in these... Well, I do see them floating on the pond, but not dead ducks, you know what I mean?
No.
I've never seen a dead duck.
Worrying.
I've never killed a duck inadvertently or otherwise.
Well, they don't die on the pond, do they? They usually creep away somewhere to die, like cats and dogs. I mean, if a cat dies, a cat does not just die in front of you. It creeps off somewhere and dies.
Well, like elephants. Nobody knows where elephants' graveyard is. That was one of the myths my parents told me.
It's quite hard not to miss that.
But my point is that it's not unhealthy to feed ducks bread at all.
It is. I'm with the guy from Stoke here in the 5 towns.
What is unhealthy is these crazy people who say if you're feeding them bread, you've got to feed them brown wholemeal bread.
Yeah.
That can kill them. The kernels that are in the brown bread can get into... No,
it can. Serious?
Yes, can get into their system.
Yeah, but at least it's actually better for you, the brown.
It's not.
Because it breaks up. That's the point about brown bread, is that the grain actually breaks it up. The white plastic bread is the worst possible thing you can feed them.
One thing you don't do is you don't feed ducks dry bread. So they come on the shore and they quack around my ankles.
What you should actually feed them is corn.
I've tried corn, I've tried green peas.
Yeah, but you're not out of a can, though. I'm talking about proper corn.
No. I've tried corn, I've tried green peas, I've tried Cheerios.
Green Giant.
Cheerios? Yeah, the breakfast cereal stuff.
It's got too much sugar in it.
Yeah, well, okay, and the only thing
that sugar rush. They'll start attacking you.
Well, no, I go there, and when I ever get there and they see my car arrive, actually, they're a bit confused now because I've changed the Jag for a Merc, but when the Jag used to arrive, they'd all flap this like this, flap, 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 and they'd come rushing out the pond, but I'd make them go back in.
They'd come towards you?
Yes, absolutely, like an army. Like an army, they'd come out the pond and flap around my ankles and all that, but I wouldn't feed them on the land.
You should video this so that we could actually believe one of your stories for a change.
I wouldn't feed them on the land, I'd feed them on the water, because the water has to dissolve in bread.
Unbelievable. I can now tell you officially that the 6 towns which make up the potteries are Hanley, Burslem, Longton, Stoke, Tunstall and Fenton.
Told you.
So I don't know where you got Port Vale from.
Well, Port Vale's one of them.
No, it isn't one of them.
No, because the club is called Port Vale, and therefore it is one of them.
Well, there's Port Vale in one of those towns.
Yes,
then.
it is.
Which one?
I don't know. Burslem, I think.
Really?
And
well, no doubt
I'll tell you, old Robbie Williams would tell you, because he's Port Vale's most famous fan.
He is. Thank you very much indeed. And you're Everton's most famous fan. Are you going to the game?
No, I'm not going to the game this weekend. No, hang on. Excuse me. I have familial duties, okay?
Do you?
Yes, I do.
Ah.
Now, you know that my mum's had a bit of a hard time lately,
Yes,
so,
I do.
if you don't think I should be putting in my...
So when your family sees you arriving, they all come running up towards you as well, just like the ducks, I suppose.
Yeah, they do. And
they all pretend they're not in. You have to put something on the chimney to smoke them out.
No, they do, and they always head for the boot of the car to see how much booze I've brought.
Yeah, well, enough for yourself, no doubt.
Enough for myself, enough for everybody.
Yeah.
I hope. And at this time of the year with Christmas, of course, you stick all the old... That's what I do. I start buying cans of Quality Street round about September. And by...
I thought you could say Special Brew.
No. And by this time of the year, I've usually got about 8. I've got the Quality Street, the Roses, the Heroes. I've got them all. All in the boot of the car. All ready for Christmas.
Deary me. Mike Porky Parry, if you see him broken down on the side of the road, you can always stop him and get some chocolate off him, apparently. He'll be back, of course, on Tuesday night next week, actually, it'll be. And the podcast will be available in a few hours' time. It's the Two Mikes. Look it up on iTunes.